So I just watched Zack Snyder's Justice League, and it's the real deal. So let's talk about it. Zack Snyder's Justice League is an HBO Max original featuring Zack Snyder's complete and original vision for the movie Justice League. As we go into this is a spoiler-free review, and if you want to just skip ahead to my score, there's a chapter marker down below or to whichever section might be helpful for you. Now, before I dive into my review, I think with this particular project, it's important to explain the backstory of what Zack Snyder's Justice League is. Many of you, of course, are extraordinarily familiar with the Release the Snyder Cut movement, but also a lot of people are wondering, why are they releasing the movie Justice League for a second time, and why is this a big deal? Well, 5 years ago, Zack Snyder set out to make this epic 4-hour Justice League movie, and that's what they shot. But due to the poor reception to Batman v Superman, as well as the success of Deadpool and the MCU in general, Warner Brothers started to get cold feet about the scope and tone of Zack Snyder's film. But tragically, in early 2017, Zack Snyder's daughter died, and he decided he needed to step away from the film, and he couldn't be the one to complete it. And at that point in time, Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon to finish the film, but in reality, they wanted him to rewrite, rework, and re-edit the entire film. This led to the theatrically released version of the film that had a mandated runtime of under 2 hours and contained 1 hour of Joss Whedon reshoots, which naturally meant that 3 hours of the film that Zack Snyder shot went unseen. Eventually, this led to a grassroots movement pushing for them to release the Snyder Cut. And after years of fans demanding it, last May, they officially announced that Zack Snyder's Justice League would be released as an HBO Max original, and they were going to be spending tens of millions of dollars to complete it properly. There is no precedent for something like this happening in cinematic history with a project this high profile with this kind of a budget. It is incredible that this film was allowed to be released. And to be very, very clear, this is a totally different film. The plot is the same. If you wrote a 1-paragraph synopsis of the story, it would read the same, but the execution of everything is different. The tone, the pacing, the flow, the dialogue, the twists, the turns, the storytelling, all of it is different. But different doesn't mean better. So how is the movie? Well, let's get started with the good. And right off the bat, this is truly an epic Justice League film. The scope is massive. The stakes could not be higher. And it's told in a way where everything is given time to breathe. It's all set up and then developed and given time, so you remember things, you care about things, and they have emotional weight to them. Sequences have tension and conflict, and the movie as a whole has a constantly building tension to it as the conflict increases. In recent interviews, Zack Snyder compared this film to Lord of the Rings, and naturally, some people will be put off to a comparison like that because, of course, the Lord of the Rings books and films are beloved classics. But the comparison makes sense if you understand what he's saying, and he's referring to the type of storytelling that he's doing here, where he's trying to build out this massive mythology of his version of the DC universe, where there have been these godlike beings among us for a very long time. There's this rich history and backstory that's explored all throughout the entire film. The storytelling, you feel the passage of time as our heroes are trying to track down other heroes, villains are trying to track down mythical items. All of it has this scope to it. And that's what he's referring to when he made the comparisons to Lord of the Rings. But it's not just bigger, it also has much deeper character moments. In the theatrical version of the film, the Flash and Cyborg kind of got put on the back burner. Flash was just used at the butt end of jokes, and Cyborg was just given absolutely no depth. Both of their characters are fleshed out so so much more in this film. In particular, Cyborg, he has this whole backstory and this dynamic with his father that's integral to the plot line of the story. All these beats that happen in both versions of the film, they're meant to tie back to his character, his relationship with his father, and his character development. And in the theatrical version, all of that was removed and simplified to the dumbest possible version. And here, it all leads to these powerful moments. Likewise, the Flash is actually pivotal to the action sequences. In the theatrical film, he was just used as the butt end of jokes that he didn't know how to fight people, so he would only push them.
See, I'm afraid of bugs and guns and obnoxiously tall people and murder, and I can't be here.
And in the climax of the film, his big thing that he did was pushing a car out of the city only to look over and see that Superman was carrying a building. In this one, he's pivotal to what they're trying to do in the climax of the film, and all throughout the entire film, he's a crucial member of the team. And honestly, I've seen the movie twice now, and I cannot fathom how anyone would think that the pushing the car sequence would be an improvement over what had already been filmed. But all the characters in this version get fleshed out a lot more. Batman feels like a natural continuation of where he left in Batman v Superman as this hero that feels deep regret over what he did in that film, so he's trying to set it right, but he's still this big, bold, bombastic version of Batman and Bruce Wayne. Steppenwolf gets much more motivation as to why his character's doing what he's doing. He has a backstory tied to Darkseid, and it's explained in kind of in detail why he's doing all of this, what he's trying to accomplish personally. It's all fleshed out. Now, he's not a fantastic villain still, but there's much more meat to his character where you actually care about what's taking place. And as I alluded to earlier, Cyborg's dad is a major character in this version of the story, both part of the character arc for Cyborg, as well as just tying into the plot line in moving things along, making things happen. He has a character arc himself. And a nice little touch in this version is you really get to see Alfred as the butler. Like, he's still smart, intelligent, he pushes back against what Bruce Wayne is trying to do, but at the same time, he does a lot of very butlery type things that add just the right amount of levity in a way that's organic and doesn't feel like a forced Joss Whedon setup and punchline. From there, let's move on to the storytelling, and this is where things get interesting because we do have an alternative version of this film as a point of reference for comparison. In the theatrical version of the film, they were trying to tell this massive story with a big ensemble cast and a bunch of characters that needed to be introduced, all trying to tell it in just 2 hours. And that meant all the nuance was removed, all the back and forth inside of sequences, and it felt like they were constantly rushing to introduce new characters and to just run from point A to point B to get to the next plot point as quickly and efficiently as was possible. And in doing so, they removed all the tension, the conflict, the intrigue in any particular sequence. Whatever would make it unique and interesting was removed because they just had to get to the next plot point. Here, everything is allowed to be developed and fleshed out. The runtime is long enough that all the characters are set up, all the plot points built out over an extended period of time. So as you start getting into the second half of the film, every sequence has big payoff. Every sequence moves the plot forward while also developing a character. In the theatrical version of the film, Steppenwolf just shows up, lays the smackdown, grabs some mother boxes and runs. No tension, no back and forth. Here, there's this lingering sense of doom in the opening scenes. When he arrives, you are anticipating him coming already. And then heroes have victories, but they also have losses. You feel things in the moment because the actions of heroes matter. And when you put all of this together, it just makes you feel so much more because you care about the characters, you care about the twists and turns, the victories, the losses, the revelations. All of it matters because it was set up and developed, and therefore it pays off when it happens. And that's exactly what my wife said once the movie was over. She goes, I felt something this time. And she's the casual moviegoer. She enjoys movies like this, but she doesn't follow movies like this. And she had a great time with it. To be completely clear, every single thing about this version of the film is better than the theatrical cut of the film. Every single thing in this version is better. But better doesn't mean perfect, so let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. As I go into these aren't necessarily good or bad things, they're things that just need to be discussed. First off, the entire movie is in the IMAX ratio, therefore it's a square box on your screen. There will be black bars on the side. That bugged me for the first shot, and then I didn't notice it at all for the rest of the runtime because I was just engrossed in the film, and I've seen it 2 times. Didn't bother me either time. Second thing, the cast of the film is essentially the same as what you saw before. There's been discussion of some additional photography to add in some new villains and some cameos and stuff like that. There are cameos. There are these characters that do appear, but they're not major new characters in it. They just make little cameo appearances. They are nice little additions, but they are cameos in the film. The runtime is over 4 hours long. If you're worried about the runtime, just watch it as if it was a TV show or a miniseries. It is broken up into 6 parts plus an epilogue, so essentially 7 parts. Each of them is about 40 minutes, except the epilogue that's like 15 or 20 minutes. So if you normally watch TV in chunks of about 90 minutes, just watch the first 2 parts. When the card come up that says part 3, take a break and do something else. From there, let's move on to the bad. And the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the runtime is a bit much at over 4 hours. Because of that, I think you could have trimmed or tightened up 20, maybe even 30 minutes of the film without sacrificing any character, story, scope, scale, size, any of that stuff. Because there's just a lot in there, a lot of lingering shots of our heroes in slow-mo, things like that. You could just tighten it up here and there and tell the same exact story and still be epic in size. And even some of the additional things that were shot, I don't know that we needed quite as much of that in there. At the same time, I think the length is only an issue because they decided to release it as a single film rather than as a miniseries. Had they released this as a 4-part miniseries or a 6-part miniseries, I don't think the length would be an issue because it's not like there's full segments that I think drag or too long or needed to be removed. Just in general, a 4-hour sitting is a bit much. But that wouldn't be an issue had they released it as a miniseries. Second thing that comes to mind, there is some weak CGI in the film. This didn't detract from my enjoyment at all because I just love the fact that it exists, that I don't actually mind some bad CGI, but some of it is not up to par with other parts of it. And finally, when you get to the epilogue, it goes on a bit long. You get to a point in time in the movie where it's the natural conclusion, and then there's 3 more sequences that are essentially mid or post-credit scenes, but they're tacked on at the end and they're all pretty fleshed out and long. So it feels like the movie's still going and going and going. Once again, it didn't really bother me because this is such a project for the fans that I want to see all this stuff. And I know a bunch of you want to see all this stuff, but as filmmaking in general, it kind of goes on a bit too long in during the epilogue, just kind of teasing things and setting things up. But none of this stuff detracted from my enjoyment of this film all that much. I love that this project exists, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And because of that, I want to give a big thank you to those of you who are champions of the Release the Snyder Cut movement from the early phases. I personally didn't think that we would see this for another 15 or 20 years, and even then, it wouldn't be a refined version of it. But because of your efforts, this project exists, and it It's a completed version. That's incredible, and I want to thank you for making that happen. Real quick, before I give you my closing thoughts on Zack Snyder's Justice League, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on the project in general, as well as the film specifically once you're able to see it. And if you enjoyed this video, I've done a bunch of other DC content before. You can check it out right up there in that playlist. To reiterate what I said before, every single thing about this version of the film is better than the theatrical version of the film, and I loved it both times I watched it. I wanted to watch it a second time before I reviewed it, just to make sure that I wasn't just getting hyped up on the experience. I watched it a second time and just felt the exact same thing. I can't imagine anyone that has been a proponent of the Release the Snyder Cut movement being disappointed by this film. And I think it might win over some critics of Batman v Superman because it has better storytelling, more character moments, and a lot more emotion. This is a superhero epic, and one that I love. Overall, it's an A on the entertainment scale, a 9.5, and this is a must-watch for fans of the comic book movie genre. Be sure to let me know what you thought down below in the comment section, and if you want more DC content, check out that playlist right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.